Today we are in Lisbon, Portugal, and we will meet members of two ecological organizations, and they will tell us how is an eco situation in Portugal now. What are the strong and weak sides of the environmental movement here?
My name is Sinan. I'm originally from Turkey, but I live in Lisbon in Portugal for more than 8 years now. I'm part of a grassroots collective called Climaximo. It's an open, horizontal, anti-capitalist collective for climate justice.
Okay. It is a Portuguese organization.
Yeah, it's based in Lisbon. It has local groups in Lisbon and in Porto.
And what do you do? What's your ecological actions?
So Climaximo is based on the analysis that the root cause of the climate crisis is the capitalist mode of production, which means that we have to radically change the way we produce, we distribute, consume, and manage the entire society and all the goods and services involved in it. We exist because we thought that in 2014-15 a group of people came together and we thought that there was no street mobilization, mass mobilization and civil disobedience component for the climate discussions in Portugal. So we formed Climaximo to make those things happen. So we organized marches, we organized non-violent direct actions, we organized camps, action camps against fossil fuel infrastructure or otherwise. We are part of international networks that do similar work to us. We are also closely related to the Fridays for Future and Extinction Rebellion, but also other organizations like Ecological in Germany, Reclaiming Power in the UK, and so on.
Who are members of your organization?
So the group is
average person.
So the group is open and meets weekly in announced meetings. So we don't really have a well-defined membership procedure. People who agree with the principles and the basic political stance of the group can simply show up in a meeting, and we use consensus decision making. So whoever shows up in a meeting can actually propose whatever they want and also raise concerns about what is going on at the moment in the meetings. We are about 70 people in total. Demographically, like now it has changed a little bit with the Fridays for Future mobilizations. It used to be more like people in their 20s, 30s and a few people in their 40s. Now we also have a lot of people that are actually teenagers.
Hello, I'm Pedro. I'm from a Portuguese startup, Planeteers. It's not my company, I'm part of the team. And it's been a very good journey to these days until we are here talking with you in a talk.
Yes, I know that Pedro's company has like two main branches. Yes, it is market, and you're going to do some big event. Can you tell us and about market and about the event?
Well, actually, Planeteer started with with a new idea about sustainability with Sergio and Carlos long years ago, and they always try to build a big project around sustainability. The big idea was about create connections between cities and gamification. But after the Web Summit in 2016, actually it's making 3 years so far, They decided to simplify the idea, and then the Planeteers Marketplace was born after a couple of months with a simple idea of connecting every consumer and every company that wants to have a more sustainable consumption pattern.
Who are your customers in Marketplace?
Well, in the beginning, the idea was totally focused on business to consumers, so consumers like regular people like us, and they are our main customer. But after a couple of months, a lot of companies starting to come and talk with us and want to buy this product. So nowadays we work in two sides, business to business and business to consumer.
Yes. And what consumer can find on Marketplace? What I can find if I
Well,
go to the
the
website?
idea is you can find, like our slogan says, is all you can do for the planet in one place. So basically, right now it's more than 200 companies already selling in our marketplace, more than 1,000 products, and they are diversified among more than 20 e-commerce categories. So everything from fashion to foods to solar energy. We want to have a very diversified kind of products.
And all products are environmental friendly.
Yes,
Yes.
That's our main concern. Is we select and evaluate every product at every company. It just can be available on planeteers.com if it's among our patterns. Of
How do you check them?
Basically, we started very simpler. We had a 10 criteria algorithm,
Yeah.
10 principles. They are in the beginning. They are very empirical. So basically, they had to be certified. They have to have no injury for people. Like they have to score at least 4 and 10. But right now we understand that that's not enough. We need more quantification of how sustainable they are, and we are working with a student from Pakistan. He's developing his master thesis with us. So we want to take this evaluation to a more quantitative algorithm.
Yes.
So it's a progress, work in progress.
What about the event which you're planning in April?
Well, the event it's Planeteers World Gathering, and basically it was born for a small idea of connecting people and have in the physical world an event that could represent the community that we have in the digital world. So far, this event's going to be in April of 2020, and it's an event that we want to put all the ecosystem in one place, basically. So we have in one side the startups and the entrepreneurs that are developing new ideas around sustainability, products and solutions. Then we have a Planeteers market, which is all the companies that are already working with us in the marketplace, or they have developed new ideas, but mostly around products that people and companies can use in nowadays. And the other side, we have the sustainable communities. Sustainable communities can be since municipalities, cities, ONGs, every organization that is doing impact on this society, impact on this locality, has to be a stage and a spot to speak about and to be an example. So we have an area just for them to in the event.
You expect it to be international event or it will be Portuguese?
It's an international event,
Yes.
like the name says. So far, mostly of even the big speakers that are going to speak in or to inspire in impact stage are international, like Em and John from the American version of Shark Tank. But we have going to be worldwide, like our name says, Planeteers. It's a focus on being worldwide and inspiring people all around. So the event has to be the same thing, the same.
What is environmental situation in your country, and what about coal and renewable energy? Because I know that Portugal uses like almost 100% renewable energy, so we like don't have such a big impact in climate change.
So if I'm not mistaken, Portugal uses 40 to 50% renewable electricity.
Yes.
And electricity is around 20 to 25% of all energy. So in total, we are talking about 10% renewable energy in the entire energy sector.
Okay.
Right. So a big chunk of the energy is based on coal, around 20% of energy is based on coal.
In Portugal, yes.
In Portugal at the moment. There's a good chunk that comes from gas, fossil gas, and recent governments have been investing heavily on dams, which they consider are renewable. But every year we discover that they are less and less renewable because of the way they are built.
You mean energy of waves? Yes?
No, energy of rivers.
Oh,
hydroelectric power plants.
Rivers, yes.
Yeah. So there's no electricity produced by waves in general, as far as I know. There has been some investment in wind energy, and there's very little investment in solar. So in the energy mix, solar energy is very low, ridiculously low compared to the existing capacity. Consecutive governments have been talking about closing down the 2 coal power plants that we have in the country. In general, the discourse was that they would be closed down in the mandate of the next government and never during the government. But the last mobilizations finally made it happen that the closing down of the coal power plants will happen during this government. At least this is what they declared.
Okay, and how you will get energy? What is the future? How you see Portugal will get energy from which resource?
So there are no fossil fuels in Portugal. All energy already comes from outside anyway, independent of whether it's oil or gas or coal. It is bought from outside.
Yes.
The only energy sources that exist in Portugal are sun and wind,
And water.
and water every year less than the year before. So it has to be properly managed to be sustainable because climate change itself aggravates the situation with drought, which reduces the capacity of the rivers themselves. So if we build bigger and bigger rivers, as the previous governments have been doing, the result is drier and drier rivers, and therefore less and less energy produced anyway, but also other impacts on the ecosystems surrounding the rivers.
Okay, so it affects not well ecosystem. Yes, it affects not in good way ecosystems.
Our understanding is that at the moment, Portugal has an overload of hydroelectric energy than necessary for a sustainable management of the energy mix.
I want to ask you about environmental protection in Portuguese. You live here and you involved very strongly in this community. What do you think? How it is? How active are people, and how if Portugal enough environmental friendly?
Okay, I think it's probably a 10-year change happening. So, like 10 years ago, maybe the most radical people would speak about sustainability, but nowadays, I think that's a good thing about people in general. Is like when someone starts inspiring the others. We can see that, for instance, in the last 5 years, a lot of new projects are building, a lot of new startups. They are building and growing around this concept, and the Portuguese consumers are following the trend. So we can see, like, even the big brands that were not much sustainable, they are trying to adopt because the consumer has the power nowadays. So if people demand that the companies or the governments to change, we think that they will have to we have to go around that demand. And I feel that the Portuguese society has been a big trigger, a big driven power to change our society. I think that's in conclusion. Next year, Lisbon will be the green capital, green European capital, and I think that's a proof that our society is demanding change, and even the governments are going by.
Yes. Can you tell a bit more about the green city? Lisbon Green City.
Well, I'm not part of the municipality, but Lisbon, the mayor of Lisbon, it's a Planeteers. He has been talking about us and working with us for a couple of years and supporting our work. And actually, Planeteers World Gathering is one of the events that the municipality of Lisbon is going to support in 2020 as one of the big celebration events for an eco city or a sustainable city. And I think the changes can be seen everywhere. For instance, in transportation, nowadays most of Planeteers team we use the city bikes or the scooters, or we basically have more efficient garbage systems in our neighborhoods, or you can see like gardens like this one growing everywhere, because the government or the municipality has been changing all the squares, all the streets nowadays have
What do you think is the biggest achievement and the biggest problem in ecology in Portugal?
So when Climaxima was formed in 2015, there were 15 contracts to explore oil and gas in the national territory. We managed to cancel 13 of them in the last years. There are still 2 contracts missing, and there's a local struggle together with the national network of support and organizing and mobilizing around that issue. So the biggest success was that the government and the corporations have been insisting in these contracts, but we made it into an impossible situation for them to continue. So 13 out of 15 were cancelled in the last years.
How did you make it? Just because you made demonstrations on the streets, they started listening?
We made demonstrations, direct actions, petitions, protests, a mixture of various tactics, mostly grassroots organized. So for instance, in the south of Portugal, this was a big issue where basically all the cities had their own local groups to force change, and it created a non-friendly environment for the local governments, the municipal governments, which had to decide between whether to agree with the national government, with the central government, or whether to agree with the local population. And they ended up choosing the local population, which made it even harder for the project to continue.
Yes. I see. So people supported strong, yes? Support the organization strong, and you have a lot, how I understand, a lot of people who are not part of your organization, they still support this movement and they come to your demonstrations.
Right. So for instance, when I was talking about oil and gas, I'm talking about around 15 to 18 organizations, including Climaxima. I'm not talking about Climaxima as the main organizer, although we have been, because we are based in Lisbon, we had access to media coverage. So if we would call for an action, for a protest in Lisbon, and we would bring people from the local areas, that would have an impact. Also, we did a bunch of actions in the ministry and the corporate headquarters themselves, which are also in Lisbon. So we have been mobilizing since 2015, organizing and mobilizing since 2015. When we started, we would organize marches that had 300 people. By 2018, we were marching with 2,000 people, and with Fridays for Future, we started marching with 20,000 people. These are people that are mobilized, that go to the street and do actions on the street. In general, there is a popular consensus on the urgency of tackling climate change in the society. This is shown through sociological statistics, sociological research, besides what we have been doing.
People are changed. They started really separate garbage. They started to take care more about the environment.
Yeah, I think it's an inspiration movement. So usually it starts very small, but as long as you keep and you believe what you are doing, people gonna follow that passion or that inspiration. Of course, we always have garbage selection or recycling on a lot of this stuff, but mostly they were used like a guilty way or not so inspiring. And I think nowadays, even those systems that were so classical, they have been challenged to be more impactful on society and have people more working towards them than against them. And I think as that you see a lot of things like, of course, the money that you have in your pocket is always gonna have a important thing, and about being more sustainable. Sometimes it's actually products that are more expensive, but the thing is, it's not about buying more. It's about buying with quality and products that have a long life in average. Or it could be actually more simple attitudes like the recycling that you were saying, or changing. For instance, the other day I just met a couple with 4 kids, and they used to have 2 cars, and now they just sell 1 car, and all of them use or bicycles or public transportation, because the city just evolved, and they just keep 1 car for the necessary.
So they decided to make it just because of ecological reasons?
I think it's in a big changes has always to be 2 triggers. Of course, it's in Planeteers we believe in Sustainomics, which is a theory that basically supports that to have a sustainability change. You have to have three triggers basically. One is the sustainable, the environmental, of course. The second has to be an economical. And the third is the social. So they're always been to connected. So you feel that they have been social impact, which triggers us. In the long term, you know that they are being more environmental friendly, which is of course everyone is talking about it, and you feel that you have a responsibility for it. But the last case, we live in an economical world, so the economical trigger is very important to close this circle and make things sustainable in the long term.
Yesterday we were on website and many speakers say that if we want to be environmental friendly, we have to suffer. Really, we have to suffer. We have to stop use plastic. We have to maybe use reusable bottles and put water in them. We have to more walk. We have more use bicycles and less use cars. We have maybe not to heat our apartments so strong, a bit less. And I want to know your opinion. What do you think? Really, we have to change our lifestyle so strong, or maybe business can just give new decisions to people?
Okay, that's a very interesting question, and I think you probably want to put the finger in the problem. I don't think that's sustainable in the long term, because as an evolution point of view, we always tend to do the thing with less effort. We are lazy because that's
our nature.
That's our nature. That's how we save energy, so we can be more feasible to survive. So basically, everything that's working, it's making us more less effort, less energy spent. And the thing is, that's important to you say something like this in a entrepreneurship events, because I believe that's companies and entrepreneurship that's gonna save the planet. Because everything that's about a lot of effort, people will not stick in the long term. So that's a trigger for entrepreneurs. That's a trigger for companies to develop new systems or develop new business models or develop new products around those problems. That's gonna make the life more easy in the long term. And if that happens, they will be more sustainable, they will be more social, they will be more economical, valuable in the long term. Because if it's about being very radical and stop consumerism or stop anything that they are doing in a very radical way without the option, very better option, I think in the long term will not stick, because just some big core of people will follow.
Yes,
the rest
main
will not.
part of people will not do it. Yes.
Yeah. But okay, that's a very important topic, and I think that's more a trigger for people like us to keep working and develop new ideas and build a better world.
What do you personally change in your life to be more environmental friendly?
Basically, I don't own a car. I don't drive in general, and I try not to use it at all. I always do walkings as I can, or I use my bike for every day.
Yes, electric bike?
Yeah. And actually, it's not my bike. I don't even own a bike. I use the public sharing system.
Like Limes?
Limes are the scooters, but I use the Gira, which is the municipality bike sharing system from Lisboa. And then the next thing, it's about the things that I use in daily basis, the things that we own and that we shop is like not buying as many by emotional triggers, but because you need it.
Yeah.
Or for instance, all my clothes that I don't need it, usually I give them to support people or to recycling systems that are already collecting those clothes and giving a second life. Or for instance, in another day, I was in an event. There's a small project. Yeah, like I was saying, that I was doing a volunteer for a small project, which is Trocat, and basically it's a shopping mall not a shopping mall, but like a shopping mall, in a flea market, where you can go and you take everything that you don't use or you don't want at home, like everything. You go there, you put on the.
You live there?
You leave them. They give you some tickets, and then it's like I deliver 10 products, no matter what they are. So I can pinpoint and choose 10 products from other people.
It is cool. Do you think government in Portugal does maximum what they can do in situation?
So the government in Portugal and the governments in the world are not doing the bare minimum of what is necessary to limit global warming by 2 degrees. At the moment, there's a plan that was decided upon by the previous government, which is also the same government now, the same party. Their plan is to reach carbon neutrality by 2050.
Yes.
If Portugal does that, and if all the countries did something similar, based on their historical responsibility and their capacities, we would have around 4 degrees Celsius of global warming guaranteed. So what they're doing is basically to guarantee that things would go very, very well. At the same time, although they had proposed this, so for instance, in this plan, coal power plants would be closed down by 2030. Now, in the last weeks, they announced that they would close down in 2023, which happened just because of mobilizations on the streets. So I don't think that the government is doing the bare minimum to achieve anything. I mean, if we reached carbon neutrality in 2030, we would still have a good chance of passing 2 degrees Celsius warming. So given that, I think no government in the world is doing enough to maintain a livable planet.
About carbon neutrality, you mean about electricity?
When we say carbon neutrality, we mean zero net emissions. So for the entire sector, we actually have a plan called the Climate Jobs Campaign. It's a campaign supported by trade unions, as well as NGOs, as well as local groups. Our calculations show that 100,000 public sector jobs in renewable energy, transport, energy efficiency, agriculture, forestry, and so on, 100,000 new jobs could reduce emissions by 70% in 10 years. So this would put us on the right track for carbon neutrality as quickly as possible.
Do you see some changes in transportation system in Lisbon? Because I see there are some electricity cars, there are some motorbikes, electrical motorbikes now. Do you see that really become to be like a trend. And
Yeah. So when I came here, 8 years ago, I remember one cruise arriving to the port of Lisbon. Now there are 3. So every year, each one of them is equivalent to the old town, old family. So every day, 2 to 3 neighborhoods comparable to the city center where they want to visit. They arrive, they eat everything, and then they go back.
yes.
A similar situation happened with aviation. So this, for me, is transport. It has been radically increasing for no actual real needs of individuals. It's just rapid consumption, and that came together with touristification. This produced a bunch of other services that previously were inexistent, like small carts that are sometimes gas, sometimes oil, but many times
You mean
electric.
tuk-tuk?
Yeah, tuk-tuk
Yes.
services. That was not an those electric tuk-tuks did not replace a need. Previously, there was no such need. This need was
Yes.
created, and the same is happening with most of the bikes, and they also now have scooters.
Yes.
They are serving tourists because basically scooters are way too expensive for a normal person that lives in Lisbon. It did happen in the last years that a large chunk of Lisbon people had to leave city center to go to the outskirts, and they started using public transport.
Yes.
And very recently, if I'm not mistaken, this year, there was implemented a reduction of the, what's it called, the monthly pass for public transport
Yeah.
was reduced drastically. So this was a victory that we had. Public transport involves everything that is in Lisbon, but also it was extended to the greater Lisbon, so the surrounding areas also managed to access the city in ways that were impossible before. So just to give you an idea, for each individual who was not living in the city center would pay around 60 to 120 euros per month, and now they're paying 40 euros instead.
You said about that the number of tourists increased, and because of tourists, it is like new sector of economy, as tuk-tuks and some more restaurants. Do you see it like negative side of negative changes?
It's unproductive. It doesn't serve anybody.
It brings money to country.
Yeah, it doesn't bring goods or services. It consumes the city and replaces it with money. So for instance, it takes housing and gives money to some people, not the people who had housing before, right? So I know a lot of, for instance, people who have masters or PhDs who are doing guided tours. This creates a lot of precarious work also. Yeah, basically the model that they implemented has nothing to do with the needs of people. It also does not produce development for anybody, right? You have a house, and that house becomes a hotel.
Yes.
That doesn't produce anything valuable for the society in general.
What do you think? Mainly people in Portugal, maybe you. What products do you use? What is for sure you use like ecological, like soap, for example, or maybe clothes? How you choose more ecological things, and do you think a lot of people do?
So I bike everywhere.
Like bicycle?
Bicycle, yeah. I go by bicycle everywhere. And I realized that in the city center, which I would consider anything that is within the circular highway, it's the fastest way of transport,
Yeah.
including car. So it is not worth taking the metro, it is not worth taking the bus, it is not worth taking a car, which I think is a bad idea. I think I should be choosing bike for health reason over metro. But at the moment, metro is slower because it doesn't come on time, there are always problems.
Oh, wow, it sounds like
So-
impossible. Usually subway is the best transport system.
Yeah, but
very clean.
it's underinvested and underemployed. So it has less people working for maintenance.
Yes.
There's very little investment in it. So for instance, but that's a choice I make. I'm also part of a renewable energy cooperative,
Yes.
Supposedly I receive my energy from renewable sources. However, the legislation does not allow my cooperative to distribute the energy, so they are only capable of selling the energy to the distribution monopoly, who then gives it back to me, so I actually don't have direct control over what energy enters into my house. Otherwise, I live with minimum wage, which is, for all practical purposes, around 550 euros. I don't choose more expensive products in general. I either cook at home, which is an ecological choice, but otherwise I choose the cheapest option in general.
Yes, but problem is with ecological things that usually they're not cheap. Usually clothes and all cheap products, it is plastic and some synthetic materials. And if you want to go ecological, usually you have to pay more.
Right, because it's rationalized in a certain way that if you produce something in the other side of the Atlantic and then send it to somewhere in Europe to get packaged and send it back to here,
yes,
that's cheaper than producing next door.
Yes.
This is rationalization. This is capitalist rationalization. It is actually cheaper to do it that way at the moment because a lot of the costs are externalized. Because mass production reduces costs and so on. So this is the way our productive systems are organized at the moment.
Yes, and it looks like it is very difficult to change it because there are some economical reasons. And what do you think? It is possible to fight with these reasons because people try to make more profit. And we, ecological movement, we have to show that there are more important things.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it will be more expensive or it will take longer time, but we have to do other choice. Do you think it is possible to change?
It's quite possible to change. Actually, it's a little too late not to change.
Yeah.
When we say, so how can I say this? So my feeling is that if we try to maintain the existing socioeconomic system, there's no way out. We are going to go around 4 to 5 degrees Celsius. That's the best case scenario for that is fascism. The worst case scenario is entire collapse of civilizations. And we have tried solving this through corporate mechanisms, through market mechanisms, through international agreements, through incentives, tax incentives, subsidies. All of that was tried in the last 20 years and it failed. That was plan A. I think we need a proper plan B that goes beyond this logic and says it's not only flawed logically, it was also tried out and it just doesn't work. So we have to stop focusing on profit and start focusing on people and the planet.
What tips could you give to people who watch this video, how they can influence ecological situation in a good way?
This would be a harder question, say a year ago. Now it's a lot easier to answer because there are loads of grassroots groups and mass movements around the entire globe at the moment. Just join one and make change happen directly.
And what about lifestyle?
Yeah, go out, stop being inside the house, go out to the street, do direct action, do civil disobedience, put your body on the line and make political change happen. This is the lifestyle change that we're proposing to people. Stop being individuals. That being individual is the wrong individual choice. Mm-hmm. Be collective, act collective. There is no, we as consumers do not have power because of the way the society is organized. We know that less than 100 people have more wealth than half of the world population, which means that economically speaking, market mechanisms oriented speaking, half of the world population has less power than around 60 people. So that is the wrong territory to fight this struggle. We propose to people to go to the street, take political action, take direct action to make social change.
How did you like our meetings today? Would you like to see more interviews with eco-leaders from different countries? Hope you enjoyed it. See you soon. Bye.